SV DevOps, State of the Union 2013. So let me give you a little background here. So I was fortunate enough to, I will slide a little bit to describe who I am. I was fortunate enough, I was at Canonical. I was actually working there as part of a cloud evangelist. It was in 2009, and I saw that Patrick Dubois was running a DevOps Days, and I actually had heard about DevOps Days on a podcast, or DevOps on a podcast, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta find out what this is. And I don't know if you guys know Andrew Schaefer, but a little idea on Twitter, he was basically on his podcast, and he was talking about agile infrastructure and agile operations, and I almost drove off the road, because I was like, God, that's gotta be exciting stuff. And I called him up and I said, well, what is this stuff? I need to know more. And he's like, I don't know, there's some guy over in Belgium doing a whole bunch of stuff with it. So I contacted Patrick, and he said, you should call. We're running this DevOps Days conference. And so I got Canonical. I kind of tricked him into thinking that it was something that they should do. And so I went over there, and I got to go to that first DevOps Days, and it was amazing. How many people have been to DevOps Days? Yeah, and we're having the one we're going to have here at the end of Velocity that Friday and Saturday, right in the convention center. We're going to have it in June, so you really should. It's pretty awesome. I mean, anyway, it was amazing because there was this pent up. Everybody, all these people had this kind of same idea of frustration and like excitement about what we do for a living. And it was only about 30 or 40 of us, but it was just this amazing kind of renaissance of, my God, this is so exciting. And a couple of guys that were there went up to London, and they started the whole DevOps thing there, and then a couple of guys went to Australia, and I was like the only one from the States, so I came back, and I worked for OpsCode at the time, and I got first Damon to help me over here, and me and Damon I worked for OpsCode at the time, and Jesse Robbins was the chair of Velocity, and I said, what do you think Velocity would do if we ran a conference right after the Velocity conference? He says, I think they'd love it. And so we ran the first DevOps Days in Mountain View, and I just kept going to these, and over time I just kind of became sort of a master of ceremonies, where they if I go to one, they let me go ahead and do kind of the State of the Union. And so I threw this at Dave. He's like, what would you like to talk about? I'm like, why don't I do kind of what I normally do is a 15-minute State of the Union of DevOps, because I go to a lot of DevOps conferences. So to start off, I want to talk about Paul Stamatou. And what's interesting about Paul is he was a Georgia Tech student, and he wrote this little, I would call it a nonsense open source tool called Scribit. And the thing was that, and that's not in disrespect, but the thing was that Atlanta, I live in Atlanta, Georgia Tech, Atlanta. Atlanta has this inferiority complex. Like every time some brilliant kid graduates from Georgia Tech, the first thing he does is he flies out here and joins a startup, right? And they figured out, like, we don't want to lose this kid. And so he wrote this little thing, and all the VCs tried to like fund him and give him, they really tried hard to keep him in Atlanta. And I was following on Twitter. He's a really smart kid, and I've been following him for quite a few years, and they kept him for probably 4 or 5 years. And I noticed this tweet said, my first day at Twitter, and it was linked to a picture. And I saw this picture, and one of the things you're going to hear a lot about in this presentation is about culture. What I think about culture, and what I've kind of picked up over the last year and a half about culture and DevOps, because I think it's the most important part of culture. But this picture says everything you want to say, whether you hate Twitter or love Twitter or whatever. It's just everything you need to know about what they think about their employees. Now, how many times you've gone to a company and you don't even have this on the first day? Or it's not connected and you can't do it, right? That's been most of my career, right? 1 out of every 50, I have one of these. But they had a nice little, a little cover for it, his name. They probably, I guess that's a T-shirt, and I'm sure this is a handwritten note that says something like "Welcome to Twitter." Pretty cool, right? But and then a coffee mug, and that's cool. But what really got me here was that somebody actually poured not only they gave me champagne, we really are excited about you coming to work here. You're going to be so awesome, and we really like you. But they poured the champagne, and I may be adding some literary license here, but I'm thinking the timing of the champagne, they couldn't have done that the night before. right? So not only did they time getting the computer to him and all these nice things and a handwritten note, and somebody probably figured out, he's going to get here at like 9, probably at 8:55 we should actually pour a glass of champagne for him, right? So, so culture, right? It's just that one picture says a lot about what they think about a new employee. So my background on Botchagaloop on Twitter, I've been doing this crap for almost 35 years. My first, say, 20 years, I guess, I would say I was an assembler programmer on mainframes. And then I got into distributed computing. As I told you, I worked for Ubuntu. I did the Ubuntu Enterprise Cloud, which was really eucalyptus. This was probably the most exciting company I've ever worked for. I became friends with Adam Jacob pretty early in my, this kind of world of distributed computing, and I came on board there and had a blast. I think I was the ninth guy there, and I kind of figured out somewhere between here and here what my I wish I would have figured this out when I was 20, not 50, but I'm really good at getting in companies around their A round, and then leaving like right around the B round. Like when I start to have to do spreadsheets and turn in expenses and shit like that, I usually like to get the hell out of there. And then I went over, kind of did the same thing, kind of jumpstart. I like to take companies, build adoption. Damon's been a good buddy of mine. We do the Cloud DevOps Cafe podcast together. And we went in there, and I think mission accomplished. I helped DTO get a fair amount of adoption. And now I'm in Stratus, which is a cloud management solution. We had to rename ourselves to Stratus. And I'll talk about this cookbook that I'm working on a little bit later with Gene Kim, so more to come about that. So this is kind of a plug, but it is the basis for the rest of the conversation, which is me and Damon. Damon, everybody probably knows who you are, but there's old Damon. We do a DevOps Cafe podcast, and we've been doing it for quite a while. And so that first Mountain View DevOps, after that the Mountain View DevOps, we were so blown away. 300 people showed up, and it was right after Velocity, and we were wondering are people still going to be excited after 3 days of Velocity, and then spend 2 more days talking about technology, and it was. I mean, on the second day of DevOps, which would have been the 5th day of the week, for people just spending all this time talking about technology. At 4 in the afternoon, there's still 280 people in the room, as excited as they were probably at Monday. And so we did a podcast where we just talked about it, and we have it out there. And we actually just spent an hour trying to figure out what the hell just happened. And we tried to kind of come up with what we thought could be, during the podcast, we didn't set out and say, hey, at the end of this podcast, we want to come up with a taxonomy for DevOps. We just wanted to figure out, how could we explain it to ourselves? What did we see, and what was that crazy excitement? And we came up with this kind of CAMS, this culture, automation, measurement, sharing, as kind of, it's become kind of a loose taxonomy for DevOps, but it does give us a kind of and I say loose in the loosest sense, because the intention was never to build and say, hey, I'm the guy who invented CAMS, but the real important, culture, and we'll talk about culture is culture, automation, things like you would do Chef, Puppet, things you might want to automate, measurement, things like monitoring, but really more of a flow of measurement. And then obviously it's kind of a loop of sharing, right? It's all about this sharing. So I will say that, and I've said this a lot, and I think that a lot of the rest of the slides are going to, this presentation is going to be almost all about culture. I always say that, if you don't get the C, don't bother with the A, the M, and the S, right? I mean, and so I say that a lot, but there's another guy who says that, and that is Peter Drucker, right? So, he says that culture eats strategy, right? And we all say, here's the thing, so for 3 or 4 years I've been going around saying, culture, it's gotta be culture. And people look at you with that kind of, either you look at you stare-eyed shut the hell up, or they say, no, we get it, John, no, culture, absolutely, yeah, sure. Can we get that chef recipe running? No, let's, what was the part about culture? No, absolutely process, culture, yeah. So people kind of, either talk about it as that, blah, 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 or it's that, kind of pretty cat or kittens and puppy dogs thing that nobody really wants to deal with because it's hard. So what I've done over the last, say, year and a half is I've really tried to figure out what is culture? What does it fit? How can we make sense of it in DevOps? Because from just saying, oh yeah, you've got to get culture, and then not really having any poster child to say, well, culture looks like this, or how could you apply maybe scientific method to culture, right? I've really been thinking a lot about that, and one more story is one of the things I did early on when I went to DTO is I figured, wouldn't it be great if I created a DevOps workshop? And so I figured I could create this 2-day DevOps workshop, and the first day would be all about culture, and the second day would be all about automation and hackathon and go ahead and use Chef and all this really cool stuff. And it was so annoying because it was the same thing. Like after the first hour of talking about culture, you'd get the guy who organized it come up to me and say, John, when are you going to get to the the recipes and the chef stuff? I'm like, well, I got the rest of the afternoon on culture. He's like, the guys are getting pretty restless. They really want to. I was like, it was so frustrating. And in fact, at that point, I finally said, I'm not even going to run this class anymore because it was too frustrating for people to kind of look at me and say, oh yeah, no, John, no, totally get it, but like, can you condense that to like 30 more minutes and then spend the rest of the time, doing continuous delivery or, so as I've been looking at this over, say, the last year and a half, I think there's been some interesting trends in how people are looking at culture. And this is all my opinion, and I'm going to talk about 3 companies, and some of you guys might even work for these companies, and you might say, hey, you're full of shit, but I don't give a shit because it's my opinion. But I'm going to say that I've identified what I think is the 3 ways organizations look at culture and kind of the tribes of culture. There's the, change your culture tribe. I'll talk about that. And then there's the, you can't change your culture tribe. And then there's the deal with it culture tribe, right? And so the change your culture tribe is the classic command and control. Thou shalt change your culture. You will have a statement that says you have a vision and control and purpose, and we're going to remove bureaucracy. It's slogans, right? It's the we're going to align incentives. We're going to utilize and motivate talent, right? And the truth is, it's all bullshit, right? It's that fear of God motivation. It's the we really do have culture because we say we do, right? And really, probably are most organizations, and certainly most legacy organizations are like that, where it's really it's a command and control, and it's really kind of grasping for air because you really don't have control over culture. So this is actually a company's corporate values handbook, where they talk about respect, integrity, and communication. Really pretty and well done. Anybody want to guess what company this is?
Microsoft.
Enron. Right? So again, that's that the change your culture tribe. It really is. It's a bunch of slogans, and it's really a bunch of bullshit. And then there's the second category, which is and actually I have to admit that until I've been kind of looking at a couple of these companies that I'm really interested in, I've really been I think I've been guilty of being in this tribe of you can't really change culture. It's that thing that sits over there, and there's just nothing we can do about it. We can kind of scurry around it, but there is this. This is pretty interesting. The CEO of Etsy. I'm going to talk about Etsy in a little bit. Chad Dickinson. He has this great article, and he went out. He wanted to find out where this quote came from. This company culture, like country cultures. You never try to change them. Try instead to work with what you've got. And the one thing that frustrated him is it really kind of said, don't even bother. Don't try to change the culture. And what he found out is actually Drucker never said this. It's been a misquote over the years, and there's some New York Times article where there's some sort of reference to this. What he was really saying is something completely different. And again, this kind of attitude of the people who try to say, well, you can change behavior, but you can't change culture. So again, if I'm making my point right, it's trying to dance around this brick wall that you have, and really trying to game the system around, like, yeah, we've got this crazy culture, so let's game the system. Don't try to change it. It's an immovable force, right? It's out of our control. And then there's the third kind, I think, where I think it is the deal with it tribe. And this is really what the Chad Dickinson, the CEO of Etsy, found out that Drucker was really saying. Is that, yeah, culture exists. Don't change the corporate culture, use it. Take advantage of it. Like, wear it. Like, be proud of it. Kind of work your way around it. Figure out what it is. Work with it. Nurture it. So it's not this immovable force that, that like, oh my God, we'll have to do this because, we'll never be able to change, and therefore, in some cases, who you are is great. I was explaining this to Dave earlier. We had a beer over at the Hyatt, and I was trying to come up with some way. Dave said, like, it's like if you're an ugly guy, I don't know if it's going to work. Like, you can't change that you're an ugly person, but you figure out a way to make yourself not ugly, right? You dress nice. You have some soiree, or another good example is like Toyota Production Systems, or Toyota. Like, after World War II, the manufacturing was decimated in Japan, right? And so I'll talk about Deming a little bit, but he came in there and he helped them understand. But what they didn't do is they didn't like change who they were. Everything you know about Toyota and Lean, it's so part of the Japanese culture, and it became the beauty of what became Toyota Production Systems and Lean. All right, and one of the things I've done over the last year and a half is read this book by Simon Sinek. How many people have seen the TED Talk by Simon Sinek? Yeah, it's called the Start With Why, and it's the Cliff Notes version is the TED Talk, and it's really awesome. The book is like way better than the so both are good. And what Simon Sinek says, and I think this is a great example of the deal with it tribe, in that what Simon Sinek says that there's this golden circle, and most people concentrate on the what or the how, and not the why, right? And he says start with why, like, and then kind of work your way out. Figure out what your why is, and then work your way out. I would say that I think most startups do start off with a why, and they lose their why, right? Most companies kind of have a kind of like, we're doing this for a reason, and over some time, leadership changes or whatnot. But the thing is there's a good example right now. The railroads. Railroads are a great example, and he talks about the railroads in the book, right? In the 19th century, railroads probably had a why, right? We're going to be better at transportation in America. Railroads in the United States, like, we're going to be better at transportation. And that's probably why the first couple of railroads got started in the East Coast and then the West Coast. And then somewhere along the way, they thought they were a railroad company. They were railroad companies, not transportation companies, right? So when the 20th century came along, what happened, right? Cars and highways and buses and eventually planes, and none of those companies really did anything, right? They never survived. They never became the great companies there because they didn't think of their why was or a train company. We're not like a transportation company. And in this book, he uses examples of like Dell versus Apple. Here's two companies had no business getting in the phone business, and one company succeeds phenomenally, and one company fails miserably. One company's why is we create awesome things, and the other company's is we can pay computers. Right, and so he goes through lots of examples, and so I say that the deal with the tribe, the successful deal with the tribes, are the ones that figure out and preserve what their why is. And there's two sides to the why. There's the why you are there. Why do you work for this organization? That's your culture, right? Somewhere in there is your culture. Like the person who started had this idea. Adam Jacob had, the founder of Opscode, had an idea to make infrastructure easier and cool, right? And then somewhere along the way, not Opscode, but other companies, they kind of they start getting bogged down on the how and the whats, right? And their marketing campaigns become the whats and the hows. And but But your why for, why do you go to work for a company? Like there's something in that company that makes you excited. And I'm going to talk about three companies, and two companies I think that's what they're, when I talk about DevOps and culture, that's what they're trying to nail. They're trying to figure out the why of who they are, and that's how they're trying to attract people, And Twitter's not one of those examples because I don't know as much about them, but I would say they're on a good track there, right? They're trying to build a culture that, like, from day one you feel great about working there. Like you feel like, wow, that was a big decision coming here, and wow, maybe I made the right decision. But the thing that Simon Sinek says that is the holy grail of the why is not only the why of why the people want to work there. Why would you want to go to work for Netflix? Why would you want to go to work for Opscode? Why would you want to go to work for any of these companies? But when that matches the why of the customers, then you got magic. Right? So if what you do in a company and the people work there have the same why of the consumers that want to buy your product, then great things happen. And in his example, Apple is one of those companies where the people who work there have this why of why they want to create these things they want to create, and the customers have the same why. He has some other great examples about Southwest Airlines, and so basically, what I would say is the deal with the tribe is figuring out that why, as the companies that want to basically nurture the culture, right? So Deming has, how many people heard of Edward Deming? Right, so he's a management scientist. Most people would credit him for revolutionizing manufacturing in Japan. And in fact, he basically redefined manufacturing science for the world. You could argue that lean indirectly came from Edward Deming, right? So lean, and if you've been paying attention to DevOps, a big part of DevOps is lean. And you kind of have Deming, his impact on Japan, that impact on Toyota Production Systems. Toyota Production Systems becomes lean. You have the agile movement. You have kind of the whole idea of lean and flow and all that, and it does translate a lot to what we do in DevOps. And in fact, if you ever get the opportunity to read some of Deming's stuff, you'll read some of the stuff and you'll say, holy shit, that's a presentation I saw last week on DevOps. In fact, he has this thing, I didn't do this on purpose, but he has Deming's 14 points. And if you have a chance, look up the Deming's 14 points, and they're so DevOps. Almost everyone will like, oh wow, that's I saw such and such give a presentation. He said this is what's the most important thing we do. But one of the things that I think Deming was really awesome about is he came up with this thing called the system of profound knowledge. And I'm not going to go into detail. There's a lot written about this book, talks all about it. But he says that when you're trying to deal with complexity, and so complexity might be the management of something in an organization or managing an organization, you have to look at that problem under basically 4 lenses. And 3 of the lenses are pretty much for people who are engineers, are pretty straightforward, right? One of the first lenses would be knowledge of a system. That's systems thinking, right? It's flow. You might want to think of it as theory of constraints or keeping things flowing, right? Then he would also talk about you have to look at the lens of something called theory of knowledge. Theory of knowledge is just applying scientific principle to everything you do. Deming's had this thing what he called plan, do, study, act. Like you do not do anything unless you're following scientific principle. Like you don't just do things. You do things, you plan them, you do them, you study the output, and then you act. Right? And there was a quote about Toyota Production Systems where they said that's the way Toyota Production Systems ran. There was a great quote in a Harvard Business Review which said that Toyota Production Systems was a community of scientists continually experimenting. Right? So everything they did, whether it was a floor man, it was a floor manager, it was a line worker, they were always working in this scientific mode. It was a science. You don't like just make an assumption, or you make an assumption, but you don't just do it. You do it and you test the results, and it's a failed experiment and you do something else, or the experiment succeeds and you move forward. But the last piece is the one where this ties into the whole culture thing. Is he said, okay, if you're analyzing a complex problem, a complex organization, or a complex outage, or whatever, you have to apply a systems thinking, you have to apply theory knowledge, and I didn't cover variation. So variation is also the statistical analysis of things, like checking the variation is something called statistical process control, where you are looking things based on the other historical data and comparing it to things that have already happened. So is this, like something that says 98, what does that mean? If for the last 3 months it's been 99 and 96, right, and depending on where that is statistically, it might mean something. If it was 99.9, it might be higher. But the point, this one here is the knowledge of psychology. And what's really cool here is all that other science stuff is cool, right? System thinking, understanding statistical process and variation to all the data you look at, applying scientific method. But he also said the final and equally important thing is you have to understand the knowledge of psychology. And what he said there is that people have biases and views, and you have to apply that lens on everything. So every situation not only has to be evaluated through statistics, through systems thinking, through scientific method, but you also have to look at it under the lens of somebody's psychology might be completely different from yours. A great example is one of a researcher for Deming was sent down to Africa to work with a bunch of doctors who were, these doctors were trying to basically get these tribal members to take antibiotics, right? And the witch doctors would always say, nope, not gonna happen, it's a spell, we don't need that stuff. And these young doctors would always argue with the witch doctors and the tribal members, like, oh, you're out of your mind, that's crazy talk, you need to take this medicine. And one of Deming's assistants went down there, and the first thing she did was she stopped all the young doctors and said, no, you don't argue with them. You're trying to change their psychology, their view. What you do is you tell them, oh yeah, no, absolutely, surely he's got a spell. But probably take this as well, just as a backup plan, right? So again, if you look at, like, when we think about the why, when we think about culture, we need to always be thinking about people's worldview and their psychology, and understand that people have biases, and you have to take that into account in everything you do. And so the greatest, what I think is the greatest why story. So like, you have companies that have their why. Sinek says that if the people who work for your company have the same why as the people who want to buy your product, you have things like Apple. But I think one of the greatest why stories is Lou Gerstner, right? So Lou Gerstner was brought into IBM. So IBM in like 1990 was pretty much going out of business, right? It was basically going downhill fast, right? And so IBM set up an executive team to find somebody specifically to bring in to break it apart. They were going to kind of do an AT&T style, break IBM apart, sell out the divisions. And they found Lou Gerstner, who had nothing, was not a technology. He worked for Nabisco and Amex. He was a McKinsey guy, brilliant business guy, but nothing to do with technology. And they specifically brought him in to break up IBM. And there was a lot of people, because I'm old enough that I remember that, one of the biggest divisions was Network Service Division down in Raleigh. And there were people there who were expecting to get rich on that transaction. So he comes in, he spends like 6 months there, and he figures out there's a culture in IBM. And it's like really screwed up. And it's going out of business if we don't do anything. But it wasn't like okay, let's make a bunch of slogans, my first category, and fix it. Like, everybody now is going to have a vision statement. Like, he didn't do that. He didn't ignore the culture. He nurtured it. What he realized is there was something really awesome about IBM. There was, that IBM had been. There was a reason why IBM was iconic in America. It represented to the world something. And if you ever get the chance, it's a great book. Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? He talks about this, where he talks about he made this decision that I'm not going to break up IBM. There's something here that's really beautiful. I think there's a quote, I have it in here. He said that along the way, something happened. He says, something that quite frankly surprised me. I fell in love with IBM. And guess what happened? So like, as we talk about like OpenStack, IBM adopting OpenStack and put their money into it, right? IBM put their money into Apache. Lou Gerstner was basically one of the guys who basically, once he figured out technology, was one of the guys who basically promoted getting Linux to replace AIX, right? So I mean, he single-handedly saved IBM. And from '93 to 2003, the phenomenal success, or even probably 2010, right? There's still the debates out in this strange world we're in with the last 5 years, right? But with companies like Amazon and all this cloud foolishness going on. But I mean, there's no doubt the impact that he did for IBM. And again, it was because of that, like he figured out that kind of deal with it culture, right? And so there's something there. And again, I see a lot of faces. I'm probably boring 90% of you, but probably 10% of you like, oh, this guy's great. I love what he's saying. So that's good enough for me. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this deal with the tribe has something here. Don't ignore your culture. Don't try to just talk your way out of it. Like, and especially for you guys that are starting to think about doing startups. Like, read Simon Sinek's book, and like, because he's got a lot of good foo in there, right, for like how to nurture that why and maintain that why. And so, moving on, there's 3 companies that I think are absolutely nailing the deal with the tribe culture right now. There's probably others, but as I read, so like State of the Union, John Willis, I get the opportunity to see guys from Netflix and Etsy and GitHub give presentations quite often. And there's no doubt in my mind that these guys are definitely in the deal with it tribe category. They're trying to nurture, they're building around their culture, they're not ignoring it. They definitely have Simon Sinek's why. One of them, I think, has both sides of that coin. I don't know about the other 2, but certainly all 3 have the side of the coin, which is, why do you want to work here? Why, are you the kind of person that wants to work here? And so let's, so if you look at Netflix, like, does anybody in here work for Netflix? A couple, right? So, you'll be able to help me out here, right? There's this, I mean, we've seen the manifestos, right? You've seen the Reed Hastings presentations on SlideShare. If you haven't, they're great. One of the best presentations I've seen, a top 10 presentation I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years is their head of HR. This woman, Patty McCord, she's got a Vimeo video out there. She's like she's called the Chief Talent Officer. But she's got this video, and she's HR. Like when do I stop and watch an hour-long HR, some woman in HR? And I'm telling you, she's amazing, because she talks about the why, the kind of people that they want to hire at Netflix. And you may not like that culture. Like, you may say, like, that's not for me. And that's okay with them, right? Like, they're like, we're not apologizing. It's like, this is our why, this is the people we want. And if you're the kind of person that fits this, so here's the brilliance, right? As everybody's dying and striving to figure out how to hire all these you guys, and there's a hiring war going on, and it's almost impossible for somebody who has to hire a lot of people, it's almost impossible to hire people. In fact, when I find somebody, if I can't get my HR to prove it, their salary goes up $30,000 every day I don't get them something. It's so insane right now, right? And so Netflix says, okay, how do we do this? Well, we have this kind of culture. We hire really smart people, and that's fine. Everybody does that, right? So we hire really smart people, but we put them in situations like, hey, by the way, dude, like, you're really smart. We want to hire you, but like, we're gonna make you make hard decisions. I'm just telling you that going in. It's very much like, I don't know if you guys have ever worked in a sales team or hired salespeople. Hi, Ronnie. When if I was to hire one of you guys in my organization, if you were a total fuck up, you probably would stick around for 6 or 8 months. Because I know you'd have a family, and I knew there was some kind of disconnect, and and not if you're a fuck up, it's just it didn't work, right? But when I hire a sales guy, you don't make your numbers, bam, you're out of here. And the sales guy knows that. I mean, he lives by it. He's like, I'm fine with that. And it sounds from everything I read and some of the few people I talk on Netflix, like that's it. You're coming in. We're going to pay you a lot of money. We're going to give you some really tough responsibilities. We're going to expect you to make really hard decisions. We're going to expect you to take risks. We want you to be impact players. So those are not just slogans. Like, okay, yeah, during the interview, yeah, certainly I'm an impact player, absolutely. No, day 3, day 8, day 15, day 30, day 100. Like, am I right? Is this kind of following? They expect you to be an impact player all the time. And guess what happens? From everything I read and people I talk to, if you're not, that last line is, I love this, adequate performance gets a generous severance package. So they're not assholes, right? Like, hey, you were adequate. I'm sorry. We thought you were good. You thought you were okay, right? But we told you that. Like if you came in here, you didn't realize that when we said we were going to have to be an impact player, like we weren't kidding. And so that fosters a culture, and like, so they're doing really good, and here's the beauty again, they're hiring people that are like fitting and nurturing into this culture that they're building. And they're, from all I can tell, the kind of people that they're hiring, they're doing really well at it. They're hiring really, some of my, they hired, a good buddy of mine, Adrian Cole, the J Clouds guy, he's awesome, like, bravo, Netflix, the second company is another company that is really trying to build and hire around this culture. Has anybody heard of GitHub? Yeah. I'm just kidding, come on. Yeah, I mean, they call it, so if you go and listen to the, you read and you listen, and I get the cool thing is that I know a couple of guys here, they're heavily tapped into the DevOps community. So Jesse Newland is in the ops team there, and I get to meet him at lots of different conferences like PuppetConf and lots of DevOps days. And Mark Imbracchio is like, I'm not worthy. He's one of the best VP of Ops guys I know. So I get to talk to these guys firsthand, not only just read all the different things people say, but GitHub has this culture that they're growing. There's their why too. Their why is this, like, it's a culture of collaboration. These are people that, you could just say like people like open source, but they're kind of people that get off on the process of open source. Like, they really like the idea that they have this asynchronous model that they talk about. Like, everything's a pull request. Like, it's not just that we run continuous delivery and like we're kind of new to DevOps. This is the way of life here, right? And and they clearly, every company says, well, we do automation, and we try to automate when we can. But these guys, if you follow what they do, right? Like, automation is their culture. It's not just like, well, we'll get to that, and it's a technical debt thing, right? The whole company runs on Campfire, pretty much, right? They've got this thing called Ubot, which is a robot that basically automates coffee scripts. And they've automated everything from where to get coffee, to call out to an API on Yelp, or to just send somebody some monster screaming, singing idiot, or doing a push, or checking the status of CI. It's all done on RSC. And in fact, the ops guys have built this kind of additional thing. How many people are in chat ops? Yeah, so Jesse Newland, if you get a chance, go to PuppetConf last year. He gave a presentation on this thing called chat ops, right? And it's the whole operations team has built their whole infrastructure on this UBAT Campfire thing, where everything the ops guys do is all on RSC. Right, so that all their pushes, all their everything, checking the status, doing they have this something called, it's like they'll do UBot graph me collect D interval. They'll do UBot query Nagios alerts. They'll do UBot check the status of a run from Jenkins. UBot go yell at that guy. UBot, by the way, I can't be on call for the next hour. Joe, I need you to take it. And so, all right, that sounds cool. Most companies run on RSC. I think a well-behaved DevOps company would probably have, a healthy use of some form of RSC channel. I would recommend it if somebody said what are the things you should probably do if you want to kind of DevOps up, right? But they've automated it, and better than that, like they it's part of their kind of culture in that that like when a new guy comes in and says, hey guys, what's the command to go ahead and check this? They don't get a reply back that says, oh, Billy, you have to do this and this. What they get is somebody types the command, and it just runs. Like, oh, okay, I get it. So they say like it's this constant flow of training, right? Everybody's seeing whatever it is. And the other thing is, they really live, I think I saw the quote that said that they have, they have 106, this is basically, in January, 150 people in 160 different places. Right, so they're totally embracing remote. The people come in, and then there's some great, I don't have it yet, so I'll set up an updated version, but I have all these links of where I got a lot of these references from people. But there's this great story of this guy who, this Kobe Chappell, right? And he was from Ireland, and he talks about the whole process he went through to get hired in at GitHub. And I don't know if you've met any people at GitHub, they love it. Like, they love the culture. And the thing is, though, like GitHub gets, there are certain type of people that really like working in this style of work. Right? So they're tapping into phenomenal people. And they're hiring, they're another company. And again, Mark and Braccio, arguably, you got John Osbar and Marco Braccio are pretty, top of the line, VP of Ops guys, and and he just went to GitHub about 5 or 6 months ago, right? You see all these amazing people going there, and it's because they want to go there. They look at it and they say. So this kid writes this article about how he started his dialogue with somebody on Skype, and they talked about what it would work like, what it would be like to work at GitHub, and then he went through this process, and they had somebody kind of come out. It wasn't an interview. The first thing was, I think he called the first touch or something. So the first discussion he had was really somebody just kind of telling him all the cool things, not like, hey, let me see what you've done in GitHub. Let me see what this. It wasn't a whole lot of questions about how smart you are. And then they set up they set everything up very much like what the Twitter first screen was like. Everything was kind of automated. They dotted the I's, they crossed the T's on him traveling over. Like, he didn't have to worry about anything. He got to the airport, and then there's somebody holding his, and this is a young kid probably, right? I mean, this might be his first big job out of the country, right? And it's somebody holding his name up with, some limo driver. Now, I've been traveling, I probably have 2 million miles of travel the last, 35 years, right? I could count like 4 times I got somebody that stood there with one of those John Willis names on it. And it feels fucking cool. And only one of those was from a job about 25 years ago, right? Usually it's some wacky setup. One of the times I did it myself so my kid could see how cool it was, right? I'd go to New York. But that's, for me, I look at it, I'm coming off Friday night, I've just been traveling all week. I'm in Atlanta. I don't know if you've ever been to Atlanta. You got to take this freaking escalator like 99,000 feet up to get up to the. You get up to the top, and you're just totally beat. And then you see all these guys in suits with people's names, and you're like, oh, fuck. And I got to go 8 more miles to get to my car. I mean, this young kid. It was like the champagne. A couple other things. They talk about. I told you about chat ops. They talk about like there are, we have no managers. That's weird, but they have no managers. And there are people that like that. Now, some people might say, just like the Netflix thing. You tell me, hey, you better do this, you better do this, you better do this, or you're going to get fired. No, I'm going to take that job. Same thing, some people might say, well, no. How is this craziness going to work with no managers, right? But that's they're kind of, they believe that. They believe in this model of collaboration and building and sharing and creating things is an emergent process. And so they really are trying to foster this emergence of, people kind of do what they're supposed to do. We don't tell them what to do. There's nobody would tell them to do. There's supposedly no managers. Anybody here work for GitHub? No. All right. So now I can tell a whole bunch of lies. But they really, they really live. And I would say this, I think that if you haven't done any research, I've mentioned Toyota Production Systems a couple of times. I mean, it probably is one of the more fascinating business organizations that have happened in the last, 100 years. I mean, that probably is. It's the one, to me, that was a fascinating experiment of a business, and all the impact that's come out of that has been insane. I think that GitHub has the potential to be the TPS, the modern day TPS. Now, it may fail miserably when they get to some level of scale, but what they're trying to do there is amazing. And again, back to my point, they figured out the kind of people, or they're trying to figure out the kind of people that they want to be there, and those people want to be there. And I think they're closer to the Simon Sinek both sides of the why. Right? What they're trying to deliver is very close to the people who love GitHub and love what, you know. And as I was doing some research, there's a Wired magazine that, like, this kind of blew me away, that, you know, there's a recent Wired article about GitHub, and like doctors' offices are putting data in GitHub. Municipal governments are now starting to store their data in GitHub. Right, so it's not just, you know, code, right? This is like this whole, you know, this model of making collaboration make sense. Last but not least is Etsy. How many people are at Etsy? Right, so you know, so the Etsy guys are big in DevOps. They show up at a lot of the. So if you come to the Mountain View, I mean the one we're going to have over here at the conference center, you'll probably get to see a couple of those guys speak. They're always at them. You know, I think this one, as far as the kind of both sides of the why, I think they nail it. You know, they're kind of lucky in that the CEO was a software engineer. Right? So you know, it's one thing for a software company to have a CEO as a software guy, but to be kind of you know, an e-commerce business, which, you know, even though it is web scale and it's new generation, you still don't see a lot of software engineers as the CEO. And so, if you get a chance, again, a lot of, you know, read up about this Chad Dickinson, because he's a fascinating character. He's the CEO of Etsy, and he started out as the CTO, and I think, you know, he sees Etsy. So for those of you who don't know what Etsy is, they're kind of an eBay for arts and crafts. They basically allow people to create the wackiest, craziest, crafty stuff and sell them in an eBay store, and they're doing phenomenally well. Their growth rate has been phenomenal. And the way they run infrastructure is phenomenal. They got incredibly smart people there. But the way, if you read what he talks about, he talks about the people, the customers of Etsy are kind of artists. You know, they build stuff, they craft things, they do that. And so he actually started this idea that, you know, that at Etsy, we do code as craft. So we are the same kind of artists. Like we are these people that create these interesting things, and our customers buy these interesting things. And they enable that, and they look for people who think like that. You know, there's another good quote I read that said, you know, at Etsy we enable people to make a living making things. And certainly that's their customer. Their customers are people that make weird, like, blankets that have flowers with odd colors on it, or strange type of shoes that only 100 people in the world would ever buy, right? But they see the people who, like, they nurture and work there as those same kind of people. You know, and if you look at this picture here, I've had an opportunity a couple times to visit their office in Brooklyn, and so everybody, when you go to work there, you get a stipend, and you get to build your workstation with things that you can buy off Etsy. So you can buy it. So you have this really cool, like, you'll have someone guy have this really weird lampshade, or somebody will have this like old desk, and somebody else have this, and it just has all that flavor. And they you know, and if you look at like the bios of people, even Chad or John, it says the kind of things you like to buy. So it kind of matches, you know, the why they're there is this, they're people that kind of think of themselves as people who enable, you know, making things and making things as a living. And then they really work on the tool side, but they don't attack the tool problem as it's tools to fix your culture, it's tools to reinforce your culture, right? They really attack the kind of nurture your culture model. And then one last thing, I don't know if this so applies, but they just recently got accredited as what's called a benefit corporation. And it's, again, part of this Chad Dickinson, the CEO there. It's just very fascinating. And not only is a software engineer, he's a liberal arts guy from Duke that became a software guy, became a CTO. He worked at Yahoo, right? And then he became a CTO at Etsy, and now he's the CEO. and he's doing an incredibly good job from a Wall Street perspective. You know, from not Wall Street, but investors' perspective, not a public company. But he decided. So the benefit corporation is that it basically it's what they call a B Corp, and it basically it's you get a rating to see how good you are at the benefit for society. How does your company do things? Like some of it's, are you green, or you do this, but it's a whole lot of criteria. One last thing about Chad Dixon that's fascinating, and things that in the things I pick up at DevOps Days. So in DevOps Days in London, the guy Schmetzi gave a presentation about scaling at Etsy, and these were the ops guys. And in like the last 2 or 3 slides, they talked about something their CEO does at hackathons, right? So so this Chad Dickinson shows up at most of the hackathons, or he sits down. Right? He's a coder, right? So it's kind of cool that your CEO is going to go, hey, go ahead, don't start without me. I'm going to come down there. I want to go ahead and do this hackathon thing. But he wrote like 2 really killer applications, like in the last couple of hackathons. And one of them is it's called Guest at Admin. And so what he does, he goes out to LDAP. This is the CEO now. He goes out there, grabs a bunch of names, pictures and names, and people just kind of, when they're bored or something, they'll feel like, oh, that's Bill Jones, or that's Sharon, or that. And then they have like, how good are you at? And you get a leaderboard and how good you are. And like, yeah, are they wasting their time? Of course not, right? They're getting to know more people. As he worries about, can we keep this same culture as we grow? Right? And so, hey, I'm going to sit and hack. This is cool. I'll do this. But the second one that he did is even cooler. He wrote something called Meetsy. And so Meetsy is the same thing. It goes out to the Active Directory, and it grabs like 5 or 6 people each week, and it picks out a restaurant, and it sends them, and it basically says, hey, you 7 people should go to lunch next Wednesday. How cool is that? And that's your CEO, right?
Does it talk to the restaurant API to buy the...
Yeah, I don't know. I think they do cover the lunch, though. Yeah, they probably do. Yeah, they should hook up with the chat op guys. I think those guys could probably write a coffee script to do that. But anyway, that's kind of my, I got a couple other slides. I don't know, I guess I've been going for like 45 minutes. I got a couple of slides I can talk about. I was thinking about, should I just tell you about graphite is really cool, and there's this thing called Riemann, and and I can tell you about all these technology stuff that I've been hearing, but next week there'll be 4 more that completely different names, and there are some really cool technologies bouncing around there, and I'll tell you a couple, but I thought I'd take a try at just, to me, the most interesting things that I've observed over, say, the last year and a half were really trying to figure out why is GitHub hiring like really awesome people? Why is it, if I wait like 3 seconds, Netflix will offer another $40,000 to somebody that I want to try to hire, right? And in Etsy, if you've been following DevOps, their VP of Ops is John Osbar. He's just freaking awesome. I mean, he gets mad when people say he's awesome because he fears that we're all hero worshiping him, but he's freaking awesome. And there's somebody in this room that actually didn't hire him. So, a couple more things I have. How many people have heard of Gene Kim and read his book? A few people. Okay, so out of the people, I was trying to think. We've got a book to give away, and
I was actually here when he talked about doing the book.
Yeah. So, how many people read The Goal? How many people read The Goal who haven't read Gene's book? Because this is basically a rewrite of The Goal. It's a modern day. Gene has had this ambition for quite a few years. So The Goal is this fantastic story written by a guy called Elliot Goldratt, who's basically the father of theory of constraints, which actually is the genesis of Kanban, short version. Basically, David J. Anderson was on a plane ride. He was a big, agile, lean guy, read The Goal, and knew about lean and the old manufacturing Kanban, and came up with the idea for Kanban by reading The Goal, because he took that idea of flow and theory of constraints I said, oh my God, I think I could apply this to as an agile methodology. So the goal is a story about a guy who basically this guy runs a plant. He's a plant floor. He's the manager of a plant, a manufacturing plant. It's like in the 80s, and he's told he's got 3 months to get his numbers up, or they're going to close down the plant. And so the whole book starts off. He's just gone through this, and now he's flying off to some conference to speak about his new automated robots that he's just got. And he's hanging out in the in whatever the Sky Club or the Sky Club of the time is. And he meets an old professor, an old physics professor. That, hey, how's it going? You know, and the physics professor is Jonah, right? And he goes over and he says, oh, how you doing? What have you done? What have you done since you left college? And he said, yeah, I'm plant for manufacturer. In fact, I'm doing so well that I'm going down to this conference and I'm giving a keynote on how we have improved our manufacturing flow with these automated robots 40%. And so Jonah goes to him and says, wow, that must be great. You must be doing really well. And he's like, yeah, and really not so well. I got basically 3 months or else they're going to close down my plant. And so Jonah is basically, throughout the whole book, this like conscious dialogue of, he starts with this first question of many over the next 3 months where he says, so you just had an increase of 30% flow because of these automated robots, but you're going to have to close down the factory in 3 months if you don't start making the money. And then the guy's like, oh no, you just don't understand floor manufacturing. It's like, well, maybe I don't, but I still don't understand how you can be losing money and increasing flow. And the rest of the book is, by the way, if you increase flow here, you might fuck up a whole bunch of other things over here. Right? And they call it local optimization versus global optimization. Like understanding that like a bottleneck here, addressing a bottleneck, oh my God, let's fix this, oh my God, you might screw the shit out of everything else if you don't take a global view of it. So anyway, Gene has written, if you haven't read it, it's an awesome book. He's written a modern day version, and I won't give away, although it is kind of the same story, but it's a modern day version where the plant floor is a Java Tomcat stack. I won't give away where the bottlenecks are, but it's that story all over again. It's the epiphany of flow and local optimization, and he throws a little DevOps and continuous delivery in it, and it's I think if you can read both books, because then it's really awesome. But a lot of people tell me, John, I'm only going to read one of these. So if you're only going to read one, read the Phoenix Project. And then as part of that, I'm actually I'm working on a side project, because both of these, by the way, are novels. The goal is a novel, and then Gene's book is a novel. But the DevOps cookbook is kind of a prescriptive guide of what are some of the things that that you can do to kind of get out of that bad situation of the characters in the Phoenix Project. And I'm working on that with Damon, myself, Gene Kim, Patrick Dubois, and Jez Humble, who's the author of Continuous Delivery, and John Osbar. So I think I've got other slides, but I think I've done everything I came here to do and done for today. And I hopefully that was helpful. I wanted to try a spin at this thing that's been really I've been thinking a lot about why are these companies doing so well, and the dirty little secret is that when I give presentations, usually it's for me to learn something. So that was kind of my opportunity to do a lot more research onto this nagging question: is why is GitHub doing so phenomenally well at hiring people? Why is Netflix just killing it and hiring people like Adrian Cole? And what's this stuff that's going on at Etsy that every time we show up at the DevOps days, it seems that the next person is more brilliant than the last one. So anyway, thank you very much.